Most of us know what it's like to want to change some aspect of our lives, and yet we fail to do it. Perhaps we want to break a bad habit or start a better one, but then we think, I'll start next week, next month, maybe next year, and we never begin. Or we try to change, hoping that we'll make it happen through sheer willpower alone. And then it lasts for about a week. So are we doomed to keep repeating the same things we've always done? Is it too late for us to change? Absolutely not. Today we are talking all about how to build or change a habit as a military spouse. Why is it so hard to change, and how can we make it easier? Let's talk about it. Welcome to More Than a Milspouse, the podcast for military spouses who want to live with more meaning and less overwhelm. I'm your host, Christine, seasoned military spouse, mom of 3, life coach, and your guide to intentionally designing a life you're excited about as a military spouse. I'm here to help you get the clarity you need so you can get unstuck and unlock your purpose and potential. Because you, my friend, are more than a milspouse. You have something valuable to offer. And when you pursue the things that light your heart on fire, you trade frustration for fulfillment and isolation for a life of impact. It's time to discover who you are meant to be, because together we can change the world. Hello, friend. Thanks for joining me for another episode of More Than a Milspouse. You are more than a milspouse, and I'm here to help you unlock your true potential and step into a life of meaning, purpose, and fulfillment as a military spouse. I am sitting down to record this episode on a very rainy afternoon. It's the kind of day when I just want to curl up with a warm blanket and a good book. But that's not what we're doing today. We are talking about habit change. And it's a really important topic because there's so much that we know we want to change, and yet sometimes we don't make that change, and then we feel even worse about ourselves, and we begin to believe that change just isn't possible. This is just who we are and how we show up, and we just need to deal with it. But that's not what's going to lead us to unlock our potential and to live on purpose, to find that peace, that purpose, and that fulfillment in our daily life. Last week is part 1 of this really 2-part series. Now, if you haven't yet listened to last week's episode, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to it, because it kind of sets the foundation for what we're going to be talking about today. But if you haven't yet listened, you can keep listening, and there's plenty to get out of just listening to this episode alone. But I felt like it was really important to have this conversation around habit change before we get into the holidays. A lot of times we talk about establishing healthy habits in January. It's a new year, a new start, and we're going to think about those habit changes we want to make then. But I'm backing this up, and we are going to talk about establishing healthy habits right before we get into the holiday season, which is notorious for wrecking our good habits. And that's why I think it's really important to have this conversation now. Now, I want to take you back and just recap a little bit what we talked about last week in case you haven't heard that episode yet. But we talked about this idea of our self-image. Your self-image is how you view yourself. It's the sum of your habits, your behaviors, and your attitudes. And your self-image is something you can change. You can replace the self-image you have with the self-image you want. And so if you go back and listen, you'll hear more talking about figuring out what your current self-image looks like. How do you view yourself? How do you want to view yourself? And then what specifically do you need to change so that you can show up with the self-image you want? So it's really about understanding what the specific habits or attitudes that you want to change in your life so that you can show up as the person you want to be. So you can have the self-image that you want and ultimately walk in greater confidence, accomplish your big goals and dreams, and make an impact in the lives of everyone around you. So last week, we're talking about figuring out specifically what we want to change. And then this week, we are talking about how we go about actually changing. Now, before we dive into talking about habit formation in much greater detail, I want to remind you of one thing that sometimes I forget to talk about on the show. But did you know that I have a free on-demand training for you? So many military spouses feel like they've lost themselves. They feel like they've lost their identity and their sense of self. So how do we begin to reconnect with and reclaim our sense of self? I put together a free training to help you start this process. It walks you through 5 exercises that you can do to begin to understand who you really are, what you really want, and how to build your life around what matters most to you. Because I believe when you take the time to engage in this self-discovery process and reconnect with yourself, to do the things that light your soul on fire, that's when you trade frustration for fulfillment and isolation for a life of impact. Now, you can access this free on-demand training just by clicking the link in the show notes or by going to the resource tab on the website. Okay, let's get into talking specifically about habit change. Now, I want to start by talking about 2 things that don't work when it comes to habit change. Now, we could go through a lot of tactics that don't work, but I want to talk specifically about 2 things that don't work and that don't help you ultimately achieve the outcome that you're after. And the first one is just having knowledge alone. There is a lot of information out there about habit formation, about starting a new habit, breaking a bad habit, re-engineering the habit formation process. But sometimes we start to get a lot of knowledge and then we get frustrated because we feel like we know what we should be doing and yet we aren't doing it. But knowledge is only one piece of the puzzle. You can know everything about habit formation and still struggle to change a habit. You can still struggle to change the thing you want to change, and that can be really frustrating. This was evident in my own life over the last couple of years with a couple of things that I really wanted to change, that I really wanted to prioritize in my life, and it just wasn't happening. I'm like, I know what to do. I have read books and books and books about habit formation, habit change, changing the things that I want to change in my life, and yet it's still not happening. So knowledge alone is not enough. And I personally, over the last few months, have been able to reprioritize my schedule so that I can actually begin to do the things that I know that I need to do to change some habits and behaviors in my life. And I'll kind of share my own experience as we're talking through this episode. But the first thing I want you to know is that just knowing what to do is not enough. It takes actually applying the habit. You can know all the things and still never take action and still never see success. And the second problem is when we want to change, and so we rely on willpower alone. If we just want it hard enough, if we just are disciplined enough. If we just have enough willpower, then we'll be able to change. But willpower, as it turns out, is a finite resource. And when you feel tired or stressed or you have a lot on your plate, the first thing to go is usually willpower. Imagine this. You are walking in the grocery store and you are starving. How much more difficult is it to stick to what's already on your grocery list? Or are you tempted to buy so many other things that weren't on your list? It's so much harder when you run out of willpower and when you're relying on willpower alone to help you change. So knowledge is not enough. Willpower is not enough. What we really need are two things: a structured strategy and a good support system. I'll say that again. We need a structured strategy and a support system. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, there are a lot of different strategies out there about building habits, habit formation. Depending on who you listen to, who you read, they're like, this is the method that works. This is the method that works. So there's a lot of effective methods out there, but we're just going to give you one methodology that you can use to help you change a habit or establish a new behavior or attitude. This is a particular strategy that utilizes your mindset. And you guys, if you have listened to more than a couple of episodes of the podcast, you know that I am all about mindset. I am all about hacking our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions, because those are the keys that are going to help us ultimately change. So I am going to give you 7 steps to this strategy. Step number 1, and you may be able to figure out what this is, but you got to figure out what you're after, what's your goal. And that's why I say this ties in with our episode last week, because I gave you, at the end of last week's episode, I gave you some homework and I said, figure out what specific behavior or habit or attitude that you want to work on. It's more effective if you don't try to change everything at the same time. If you just focus on one thing and trying to change one thing at a time and then build on that, you're going to have greater success in the long run. So first, you got to say, what is it that I want to change? And get really specific. What are you after? What's your goal? What needs to change? Okay, so number 1 is define what you want to change. Number 2, be willing to change, because change is going to involve discomfort. It's going to make you get out of your comfort zone. It's going to make you do what's the right, better choice rather than the easy choice, rather than what everyone around you may be doing. So you have to look at what's going on. You got to count the cost and say, yes, I am willing at this time. Number 3, you want to identify a new self-image. How do you want to see yourself? Envision yourself as a new person. How do you want to be showing up? What does that look like? So I'll give you an example of what I am currently working on. I am currently working on transforming my health habits. I have known for a long time that I'm not prioritizing my health the way that I want to be. I'm not showing up in the way that I want to be. I haven't been making the healthiest food choices. I haven't been prioritizing my workouts. I haven't been doing the things that I want to be doing because I want to show up as the healthiest version of myself. And to be able to do that, I needed to change some of my health habits, what I was choosing to eat, how much I was eating, how much I was working out. I needed to change those habits so that it would align with my vision of my future self, how I want to be, the new self-image that I am creating. And so, number one, it's figuring out specifically what habit or what action needs to change. Am I willing to change? And what kind of person am I becoming? I want to become a healthy person, someone that prioritizes their health and wellness. So I have to be able to see myself as this new self-image and specifically work on specific habit patterns, behaviors, and actions that are going to help me get to that goal. And so trying to, number one, figure out, okay, what specifically I'm changing. I'm going to start tracking macros. I'm going to start tracking how many workouts I'm getting in a given week. I'm going to start tracking how many, can you hear that thunder? It is so loud. Sorry, I got distracted. How many ounces of water that I'm drinking every day. These are specific actions to help me change this behavior so that it aligns with my new self-image as a healthy version of myself. And so now it's time to work on that mindset component, that imprinting, if you will. And so we're going to use all of our senses to try to imprint this new behavior, this new attitude, or this new habit. And what I mean by that is that when we think about something, it creates an imprint that is stored in our self-image. So we're putting a coin in the vending machine, if you will, for the person that we want to be. We're making a mark for this is how I'm showing up. And it all begins with the thought in our mind. When we think about something, it creates an imprint. So we are always creating imprints, whether we realize it or not, because sometimes we're not aware what we're actually thinking. And we might be thinking negative thoughts about ourselves, which is creating a mark on the old self-image. That is a coin in the vending machine for the old self-image that we are walking away from, rather than for the new self that we are creating. So the first thing to notice or to realize is that we're always thinking something. And so every time we think, we are creating an imprint. So what do we do with that? Well, we need to focus on what we want to have happen. I want a tally for who I want to show up as. I want to think about myself in terms of the healthier version of myself. I want to think of myself in terms as the person that makes good choices with the food that I put in my body. I want to think of myself as the person that chooses to go work out. I want to think of myself as the person that I want to become, as the self-image that I am creating. So that means I'm going to think about it. I'm going to focus on it. I'm going to visualize it in my mind. I'm going to write it down. So I'm engaging all of these different senses, trying all of these different ways to help make this stick. I am going to engage in mental practice. What am I going to do? I'm going to be thinking about the choice that I'm going to be making in the future. How am I going to feel when I make that choice? What am I going to do with that feeling when it makes me uncomfortable because I want to have the full piece of pie like everyone else is having. But I'm going to have half a piece of pie because I know that that's going to help me hit my macro goals. I'm going to visualize who I want to become, what I want to do. I'm going to practice in my mind the choices that I'm going to make, how I'm going to feel, and how I'm going to deal with the uncomfortable emotions. I'm going to think in my mind how I'm going to overcome obstacles. Last year, I recorded a podcast episode about my journey to running my first half marathon. Now, to this point, it is my only half marathon because I have not run much since running that half marathon. And not to say that I might not run another half marathon in the future, but it was a goal that was 10 years in the making. But once I finally committed to this is the time, I am going to finally run this half marathon that I have been thinking about for the last decade, then I put in the miles. I went out multiple times a week and ran, but that was only part of the process. I was also visualizing myself on the course. I was visualizing myself getting tired and what I was going to do when I got to those parts of the course where I started to tire out. What was I going to do? How was I going to keep motivated and keep going? So you've got to visualize the outcome that you want. You've got to engage in mental practice, and you've got to focus on what you want to happen and who you are becoming. And so where are we at? Like 5th, 6th, somewhere. I have lost count of the steps. You want to have some affirmations to keep in mind because our thoughts can go all over the place. And one of the best things we can do is to have some kind of affirmation that we can write down, that we can paste on the mirror, or have some way to look at it on a regular basis and remind ourselves of the goal we are after, who we are becoming, and how we are going to show up. So the more that we can come up with some kind of affirmation and then look at it on a regular basis, I try to look at my affirmations on a daily basis to help me move towards my goal. And then last but not least, take action, because all of this is just simply thoughts and ideas and dreams until and unless we take action. So you actually have to follow it up with doing the thing. You can't just think about doing the thing. You actually have to do the thing. So I actually have to go take note and say, okay, I'm going to eat these macros in a day. I'm going to set this time and I am going to go work out at this time. And so when you combine that imprinting of the new habit, that mindset shift, that focus on what you want to have happen, and actually taking action, that is where you began to see the change and you began to show up and create that new self-image. Now, I said we need two things. We need a structured strategy and we need a support system. So you have a strategy right now, but the other piece of the puzzle is your support system. And this is the biggest key to success, in my opinion. Because when we try to do something on our own, we tend to struggle a lot more. We talk ourselves out of doing the thing that we need to do. We can convince ourselves that it's not a big deal if we just, take the day off or take the week off or take the month off of trying to show up. The more that we surround ourselves with a support system, the more likely we are to have success in whatever we do. Unless and until we have a support system and some accountability in place, we are going to struggle. So think about your life. Who do you have that you can go to when you get stuck, when you lose motivation, when the willpower is gone, when you feel discouraged? Do you have a support system to help keep you going? As the proverb or adage says, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Because if you are surrounding yourself with people who are also trying to grow, trying to unlock their own potentials and become the best version of themselves, then a rising tide lifts all ships. When you are surrounding yourself with people that are also trying to grow, who are perhaps even farther down the road as you will be motivated to keep showing up. You will be influenced by those people. And if you surround yourself, to go back to the health idea, with people who aren't chasing health goals, who are absolutely okay with eating everything on the plate, or eating the extra piece of pie or the extra slice of pizza, who are not interested in going and working out when they don't feel like it, that's going to rub off on you as well. So listen, I spent the greater part of the last year telling myself, hey, you got to get back on the fitness bandwagon. Yes, you're PCSing, you are living without a house for a month, you're eating out a lot, and all of the things that won't help you reach your fitness goal. You've got to make this a priority. I knew that I wanted to prioritize my health and fitness. But you know what made the biggest difference for me? It was investing in a group fitness program. I realized that I could know all the things, that I could want to change all the things. I could even have the system, but I needed that accountability and that support to help get me started on my journey. So, number 1, you need a strategy. And then number 2, you need a support system. Your strategy should not just involve action. It should also involve mindset and really looking at what you're thinking about, because you will become the version of yourself that you want to be when you combine that action with accountability and with mindset. So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with 3 questions. What habit, behavior, action, or attitude do you want to break, start, or change? Take some time to get clear on one thing that you want to change, and then figure out what is your strategy and what support will you get. Now, if you are struggling and you need support, I do offer one-on-one support and coaching. I would love to help you get unstuck and to craft a life with purpose. And to find out more about how we can work together, you can visit my website. It does not have to be paid support. There are lots of people that you can go to help you in your journey. You can find a friend, you can find your spouse, but sometimes it does make a difference when you go to a coach, someone who is a little bit farther along in the area you are wanting to grow in, and that can hold you accountable and help you reach your goals. So figure out what you want to change, what strategy you are going to use, and what your support system is going to be. And let me just encourage you, you don't have to wait until the new year to make a change. to start creating the new self-image, to start looking at the habit patterns, the actions and behaviors that you want to implement in your life that are actually going to give you the life you want rather than the life you may have today. Rather than staying stuck, you can transform your life from the inside out, break free, build the new self-image, and show up for the world. Because when you step into that new self-image, when you step into all that you are as more than a Milspouse, you become a Milspouse on a mission, and the world better watch out. So I hope this episode is one that encourages you, one that inspires you, and one that you will share with a friend so that you can become a support system for each other as you both go and grow to meet your goals. All right, friends, I will be back with you again next week. Until then, may you live filled, fueled, and full of joy. Hey, amazing Milspouse, before you go, I want you to know that I love hearing from you. The More Than a Milspouse community exists to help you thrive as a military spouse. Figure out what lights your heart on fire and empower you to live with purpose and impact. You can have an incredible impact simply by heading over to iTunes to subscribe and leave a review. But your impact doesn't stop there. You can empower those around you simply by sharing an episode with a friend or neighbor, someone who needs a little encouragement in this military life. And if this episode was meaningful to you, spread the love by taking a screenshot of this episode and tagging me on Instagram so we can continue to reach more people, change more lives, and shift the way that military spouses look at life. Because we are better together. Together, we can change the world. Let's do it.